Welcome back. Let's talk about variables. If you remember one of the previous episodes, we said that the main task for any computer program is to manage data, right? We somehow want to get data into our program. We want to process that data somehow, meaning we manipulate it, we check it, we do something with the input data to create something new. And then we want to get data out of the program again. Input, processing, and output. And the question now is, well, where does the data go, right? If there's some data coming in, there needs to be a place to store that data. And if we process the data, we need to get access to the stored data before, to the input data, and we need to be able to store the process data somewhere again. And the places to do these kind of things, to store and to get data out, is called a variable. A variable is in a computer's memory. You can think of like a big box with little compartments, and a variable is a specific compartment into this computer's memory, into that big box there, where we can store certain things. We can store, getting back to our ATM example, my favorite example. If you remember, if you go to any cash machine and you want to get some cash, what do you usually do? You need to enter your PIN code, and you need to enter the amount of cash that you want to withdraw. And, you need some way to identify the account number, which is usually stored in some way or another on the card that you're inserting or that you're using to withdraw money if you're using it wirelessly, right? So the PIN number, the amounts that you want to withdraw, and the account number. And these are typical values, kind of data that we need to store in a variable. But we don't store everything at once in one big chunk in a variable, because then it's difficult to sort of differentiate what's the PIN number, what's the amount. If you just write it on a piece of paper with no real separation. You could say that it's difficult to say, where does the PIN number end and where does the account number start, and what's the amount that we want to withdraw. So usually we want to separate each single piece of data into its own single variable, into its own little compartment, into this computer memory box there. And the way we identify what goes where and in which compartment is by using a variable name. And maybe you've seen this, and it's just sort of an analogy to variables in math, where you have cryptic symbols like A, B, or X and Y and Z for variables. But don't worry, in programming, we usually name our variables depending on what kind of data we want to store. For example, if you want to store a PIN number in a compartment, then we give that compartment the name maybe PIN, P-I-N, right? Or PIN number, which is, I think, kind of unnecessary, because I think the N already stands for number, much like LCD, display, because the LCD means display already, the D. But anyway, so usually we give our variables names that tell us what kind of data is stored there, like PIN or account number or first name or birth date or quantity, something like that. Okay, that's the way we identify in the computer's memory where what kind of data is stored where, right? That's the idea. And in order to retrieve the data back, we use that variable name. So when we enter the PIN number, we say, okay, store that value 1234 that the user just entered on the PIN keypad in a variable called PIN number. And then once we want to check the PIN number afterwards, we say, retrieve the value that's stored in that variable PIN number. Right? And then we get back the value 1234. It's like writing on a little Post-it note and putting the Post-it note into this compartment there and to store the data. And then when we want to get it out, we just retrieve the Post-it note there and see, okay, that's what's written. That's what's has been stored into this little compartment. Okay, so computer stores data in its memory, and we sort of separate the data, the different types of data that we want to store there, by their name, by using variable names to store it and to retrieve it again. Variable is a very, very important concept in any programming language. In all the programming languages, we've got variables. So it's important to realized, that we're using them. And again, I want to invite you sort of as a, I wouldn't call it homework, but I want to motivate you to look around in your day-to-day life and see, well, okay, what kind of data am I entering here? And what could be the variable name that we could use to store that kind of data? So for example, if you're walking to your ATM, the next morning, think about it. What's the data that you're entering there? What are the different parts of the data? And what could be variable names that you could use to store these different types of data? Okay.